What if the person you trusted most stabbed you in the back for billions? Picture this: a glittering Cape Cod wedding, champagne flowing, love in the air until a single venomous whisper shatters it all. A father, a titan of hidden wealth, stands humiliated, his $2 billion empire exposed by the one person he never suspected. Betrayal cuts deeper than a knife, his son's heart caught in a web of lies spun by greed. Will he lose everything? His fortune, his family, his legacy? Or will he fight back with a vengeance that could burn it all down? Buckle up, because this tale of money, deceit, and heartbreak will leave you speechless. Welcome to RevengeX, where electrifying stories of betrayal and triumph set your soul ablaze. We're thrilled to have you join our community of viewers who celebrate unyielding resilience and fierce courage. Hit that subscribe button to never miss a heart-pounding tale, and it'd be incredible if you smashed the like button, shared this video, or dropped a comment with the time and city or country you're watching from. Your likes, shares, and heartfelt comments are the greatest spiritual gift, the fuel that keeps this channel burning bright. Now, buckle up for a story that'll hit you right in the feels. Let's dive in. My name is William Carter, and at 62, I thought I'd seen it all: decades of building a fortune from nothing, navigating boardrooms filled with sharks, and raising my son, Ethan, to stand tall on his own merits. I've always prided myself on being the steady rock of our family, a man who turned a single software patent into a sprawling empire, all while keeping my wealth under wraps to protect Ethan from the vultures of the world. I live in a modest brownstone in Boston, drive a reliable Lexus, and wear suits that scream comfortable rather than conspicuous. But nothing could have prepared me for the gut-punch betrayal that unfolded at my son's wedding, where the champagne flowed, secrets shattered, and my carefully guarded life was torn apart by the one person I never suspected: my new daughter-in-law, Lauren Mitchell. The chandelier light glinted off the crystal flutes at the opulent wedding reception on the sprawling grounds of the Mitchell family's Cape Cod estate, a 50-acre paradise of manicured lawns and ocean views that screamed old money. I stood in my tailored but unflashy navy suit, clutching a glass of overpriced Bordeaux, watching Ethan, my 30-year-old son, spin his new bride, Lauren, across the dance floor. He looked happier than I'd seen him since his mother passed a decade ago, his eyes alight with a joy I hadn't realized I'd been starving to see. I'd raised him to value hard work, to carve his own path as a marketing director without ever knowing the true extent of our wealth. Billions, not millions, hidden behind shell companies and discreet investments. I wanted him to be his own man, not a trust fund caricature. But as I sipped my wine, Lauren's voice sliced through the festive hum like a blade, her words dripping with venom as she addressed her parents, Charles and Evelyn Mitchell, with a smirk that could curdle milk. "Here's the family embarrassment we're now saddled with," she announced, her manicured hand flicking toward me with a dismissive gesture that made my blood run cold. The entire reception, 300 guests in designer gowns and tuxedos, froze, their eyes locking onto me, the unassuming father in the corner who dared to show up in a suit from Nordstrom instead of Savile Row. My heart pounded, not just from the insult, but from the dawning realization that this wasn't a spontaneous jab. Lauren's words were calculated, a public execution meant to humiliate me. And then came the first shock. Charles Mitchell, her father, dropped his glass, the crystal exploding against the marble floor as his face drained of color. "William Carter," he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. "You're the shadow investor who bought out my company 3 years ago, aren't you? The one who saved Mitchell Enterprises from bankruptcy?" The air sucked out of the room, and Lauren's smug grin faltered, her eyes darting between her father and me as if she'd just stepped on a landmine. The betrayal hit like a freight train. Lauren hadn't just insulted me. She'd been plotting, digging into my past, sniffing out the billions I'd hidden to protect my son. I'd met her only a handful of times during their whirlwind 10-month courtship, each encounter laced with her probing questions about my retirement funds and whether I'd need assistance in my golden years. I'd brushed it off as new, money arrogance, but now I saw it for what it was: a predator circling her prey. My chest tightened, the sting of her words, family embarrassment burning deeper because it wasn't just about me. It was about Ethan, my boy, who'd married this woman thinking she loved him, not my fortune. The room spun as I fought the urge to confront her right there, to expose her for the gold digger I now suspected she was. But I held back, my years of discretion warring with the rage bubbling inside me. How could I have missed this? How could I have let Ethan walk into this trap? Then came the second shock, delivered by my old friend and loyal financial advisor, James "Jim" Thornton, who'd been my rock since my wife's death. He'd slipped into the reception late, his face grim as he pulled me aside. "William, I just got wind from a contact at the SEC. Lauren's been making inquiries about your holdings, shell companies, stock portfolios, the works. She's hired a private investigator, a real sleaze named Victor Kane, to dig up dirt on you. My knees nearly buckled. Not only had Lauren humiliated me in front of Boston's elite, but she'd been orchestrating a covert attack, prying into the empire I'd built to secure Ethan's future. The betrayal cut deeper now, a knife twisting in my gut as I realized she'd been playing a long game, using Ethan as a pawn to get to me. But the shocks kept coming, each one more brutal than the last. As Jim spoke, a woman approached Claire Dawson, a mid-level associate at Ethan's marketing firm and a mutual friend who'd always struck me as sharp but unassuming. Her face was pale, her voice trembling as she whispered, "Mr. Carter, I overheard Lauren talking to her cousin Tessa in the bridal suite earlier. She said she married Ethan because she thought you were sitting on hundreds of millions and she'd crack you open like a vault." She laughed about how easy it was to charm him. The words hit like a sledgehammer, shattering the last shred of doubt. Lauren hadn't just betrayed me. She'd betrayed Ethan, my son, the one person I'd sworn to protect. My hands shook, rage and heartbreak colliding as I pictured Ethan's trusting smile, oblivious to the snake he'd married. The drama escalated as Tessa, Lauren's conniving cousin and a notorious social climber, sauntered over, her eyes gleaming with malice. "Oh, William, you didn't think you could hide forever, did you? Lauren's been on to you for months. She's got plans, big plans for your money." Her words were a taunt, a deliberate jab to provoke me, and I felt the room close in, the weight of 300 pairs of eyes now, a suffocating spotlight. My mind raced, torn between the urge to protect my son and the instinct to crush Lauren's scheme before it could destroy us. I'd spent decades building my fortune, $2 billion, to be exact, through strategic investments in tech, startups, real estate, and biotech, all while living like a middle-class retiree to shield Ethan from the greed I knew wealth attracted. Now, that greed had found us, wearing the face of my daughter-in-law. My internal struggle was a storm of its own. I'd taught Ethan to value integrity, to earn his place in the world, yet here I was, facing the consequences of my own secrecy. Had I been too guarded? Had my silence about our wealth made him vulnerable to someone like Lauren? The guilt gnawed at me, but so did the fury at Lauren for her deceit, at myself for not seeing it sooner, at the world for proving my worst fears right. I wanted to scream, to drag Lauren before the crowd and expose her, but I knew that would only hurt Ethan more. Instead, I stood frozen, the weight of her betrayal, and Charles's recognition crashing over me like a tidal wave. This wasn't just a wedding, it was a battlefield, and I was staring down an enemy I hadn't anticipated, one who'd already sunk her claws into my family. As the orchestra played on and the guests resumed their chatter, I made a silent vow. Lauren Mitchell would regret underestimating William Carter. But first, I had to protect my son from the wreckage of her ambition and from the truth about the father he thought he knew. The salt air of Cape Cod still lingered in my lungs as I stood in the wreckage of that wedding reception, the echoes of Lauren's venomous words, family embarrassment, cutting deeper than any knife. My heart was a war zone, torn between rage at her betrayal and a bone-deep sorrow for Ethan, who danced with his bride, blissfully unaware of the viper's nest he'd married into. I retreated to the shadowed edge of the Mitchell estate, the ocean's distant crash, a mocking reminder of the storm brewing in my life. I'd spent decades shielding my son from the truth of our wealth, $2 billion, built from a single software patent into a labyrinth of investments to let him forge his own path. Now, that secrecy felt like a noose tightening around us both. How had I let this happen? How had I missed the signs that Lauren was a predator in a designer gown, ready to tear our family apart for a slice of my fortune? As the guests resumed their champagne-soaked chatter, I slipped into a quiet corner of the estate's sprawling veranda, my mind spiraling back to the years that had led to this moment. It started in the early 90s, when my late wife Ellen and I were just two scrappy coders in a cramped Silicon Valley garage. We'd poured our souls into a network security algorithm that revolutionized data encryption. When we sold the patent for $30 million in 1998, we thought we'd hit the jackpot enough to retire quietly, raise Ethan right, and maybe buy a beach house. But Ellen, with her razor-sharp instincts, pushed us to invest every dime. "We're not just rich, William," she'd said, her eyes blazing with ambition. "We're building a legacy." By the time she died in 2015, our portfolio had ballooned to over $2 billion, a fortune hidden behind shell companies and trusts so Ethan could grow up grounded, not gilded. I'd kept that promise to her, living like a retired engineer on a modest pension. But now Lauren's betrayal was unearthing that secret like a grave robber tearing open a tomb. The first new shock hit as I leaned against the veranda's railing, trying to steady my shaking hands. My phone buzzed with a text from Jim Thornton, my loyal financial advisor and the only man I trusted with the full scope of my empire. "William, meet me at the boathouse. Now." It's worse than we thought. My stomach churned as I navigated the estate's winding paths to the boathouse, where Jim waited, his face etched with a worry I hadn't seen since Ellen's funeral. "Lauren's not working alone," he whispered, glancing over his shoulder as if the shadows themselves were eavesdropping. "Her cousin Tessa's been feeding her intel, but there's a third player, Derek Voss, a shady hedge fund guy with a rap sheet for fraud. He's been advising Lauren, coaching her on how to crack your financial structure." The name Voss hit like a punch. Derek was a lowlife I'd crossed paths with years ago, a slick-talking con man who'd tried to swindle me during a startup deal. Now, he was back, whispering in Lauren's ear, turning my son's marriage into a heist. The drama escalated as Jim pulled out his tablet, showing me emails he'd intercepted through a contact at a private investigation firm. "Look at this," he said, his voice tight. "Lauren's been meeting with Voss for months, way before the engagement. She's got a burner phone, William, and she's been wiring him 6 figures to dig up dirt on your holdings." 6 figures. The number burned in my mind, not because of the money pocket change compared to my billions, but because it confirmed Lauren's treachery ran deeper than I'd feared. She wasn't just a gold digger. She was a mastermind, orchestrating a betrayal so cold it made my skin crawl. My chest ached with a mix of fury and grief, the image of Ethan's trusting smile at the altar now a dagger in my heart. How could I have let him marry this woman? The guilt was suffocating, a voice in my head screaming that my secrecy had painted a target on his back. Then came the second shock, delivered by a new face. Rachel Nguyen, a bartender at the reception who'd been Ethan's college friend and a rare ally in my discreet life. She approached, her apron still smudged with cocktail spills, her eyes wide with panic. "Mr. Carter, I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I heard Tessa and Derek talking behind the catering tent. They're planning to leak your financials to a tabloid unless you cut them in for $50 million. $50 million. The audacity of it nearly knocked me over. Lauren, Tessa, and Derek weren't just digging for my money. They were holding my privacy hostage, threatening to splash my billions across every gossip rag in Boston. My vision blurred with rage, but beneath it was a deeper wound. The realization that Lauren's betrayal wasn't just about money, it was about power, about humiliating me to prove she could. The third shock came like a lightning bolt, raw and electric, as Tessa herself strutted onto the veranda, her lips curled in a sneer that could have peeled paint off a wall. "Well, well, old man," she spat, her voice dripping with street-smart venom. "Thought you could play the broke-ass dad forever, huh? Lauren's got you pegged, you sneaky bastard. You're sitting on billions, and we're gonna carve out our piece, whether you like it or not." Her words were a slap, crude and deliberate, meant to rattle me. But what stung worse was the glint in her eyes of predator's glee, reveling in my exposure. I wanted to fire back, to tell her she was nothing but a cheap opportunist, but my throat tightened with the weight of Ethan's future. If I fought back now, would it destroy him? Would it shatter the life he'd built on his own terms? My internal struggle was a hurricane. I'd spent my life protecting Ethan, teaching him to value integrity over wealth, but my silence had left him vulnerable to monsters like Lauren, Tessa, and Derek. The betrayal wasn't just theirs, it was mine too, for thinking I could outsmart the world's greed. My heart screamed to confront them, to expose their scheme in front of the whole damn reception, but my head warned me to play it smart, to protect Ethan from the fallout. I pictured him, laughing with his groomsmen, oblivious to the vultures circling his marriage, and the pain was unbearable. I'd failed him, not by being poor, but by being too rich, too hidden, too trusting. As Tessa sauntered off, cackling like she'd already won, Rachel stepped closer, her voice a quiet anchor. "Mr. Carter, Ethan doesn't deserve this. I can help you get proof texts, recordings, whatever you need to stop them." Her loyalty was a lifeline, a reminder that not everyone was out for blood. But Jim's warning echoed in my mind. "William, if you don't act fast, Lauren's crew will drag you through the mud, and Ethan will pay the price." The stakes were higher than ever, $2 billion, my son's heart, my family's legacy. I straightened, my resolve hardening like steel. Lauren and her cronies thought they'd cornered me, but they didn't know William Carter. I'd built an empire from nothing, and I'd be damned if I let a pack of hyenas tear it down. Tonight, I'd play the humiliated father. Tomorrow, I'd show them what happens when you betray a man who's been playing the long game for decades. The Cape Cod night pressed against me like a heavy fog as I stood on the veranda, the ocean's roar, a distant taunt to the chaos churning inside. Lauren's betrayal, Tessa's venom, and Derek Voss's shadow loomed larger than the Mitchell estate's glittering chandeliers, each a jagged piece of a puzzle I hadn't seen coming. My $2 billion empire, built to shield Ethan from the world's greed, was now a beacon drawing vultures to my son's life. My chest ached with a cocktail of fury and grief, the image of Ethan's joyful dance with Lauren now a cruel mockery. How had I let her slither into our family? The guilt clawed at me, a relentless whisper, that my secrecy had handed her the knife she was now twisting in our backs. I wanted to storm back into the reception, drag Lauren before the crowd, and expose her for the scheming leech she was. But the thought of Ethan's heartbreaking held me back. I was his father, his protector. How could I destroy his happiness, even if it was built on lies? As I gripped the veranda's railing, my phone vibrated again. Jim Thornton's name flashing like a warning siren. "William, get to your car. I've got something you need to see now." His voice was clipped, urgent, the kind of tone he reserved for market crashes or corporate coups. I slipped through the estate's manicured gardens, avoiding the prying eyes of guests, and found Jim waiting by my Lexus, his tablet glowing with a document that made my blood run cold. "Lauren's not just after your money," he said, his jaw tight. "She's been working with Derek to plant a mole in your investment firm. Meet Greg Harper, your new junior analyst." The name hit like a sucker punch. Greg, a fresh-faced kid I'd hired 6 months ago on Jim's recommendation, had been feeding Lauren intel on my portfolio, every stock move, every real estate deal, every biotech startup I'd bankrolled. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was surgical, a calculated strike at the heart of my empire. My knees buckled, and I leaned against the car, the cold metal grounding me as my mind reeled. Greg, with his eager smile and Ivy League degree, had been a spy in my inner circle, selling me out for what? A cut of Lauren's $50 million ransom? The drama spiked as Jim swiped to another screen, revealing a recorded call between Lauren and Derek, intercepted by a cybersecurity buddy of his. Lauren's voice crackled through, sharp and smug. "That old geezer Carter thinks he's slick, hiding his billions like some cheap-ass Houdini. We'll bleed him dry, Derek. 50 million's just the start." Her words were pure street venom, the kind of trash talk you'd hear in a Boston dive bar, not a Cape Cod mansion. But it was Derek's reply that sent a chill down my spine. "I've got dirt on Carter's offshore accounts, hundreds of millions tucked away in the Caymans. We leak that to the feds, he's toast." Offshore accounts? I'd never touched anything illegal, but the accusation was a grenade, primed to explode my reputation and drag Ethan into the fallout. My heart pounded, not just from the threat, but from the realization that Lauren's betrayal was a hydra, sprouting new heads with every revelation. She wasn't just after money. She wanted to ruin me, to burn down everything I'd built to protect my son. Then came the second shock, raw and gut-wrenching, as Rachel Nguyen emerged from the shadows, her bartender apron swapped for a hoodie, her face pale with urgency. "Mr. Carter, I followed Tessa after she mouthed off to you. She's meeting with a reporter from the Boston Globe right now, behind the estate's greenhouse. They're talking about a scoop on your wealth, something about tax evasion and insider trading." My vision blurred, rage and panic colliding like a car crash. Tax evasion? Insider trading? The lies were piling up, each one a bolder fabrication to smear me. I pictured Ethan reading the headlines, his career as a marketing director shredded by rumors of his father's supposed crimes. The pain was visceral, a knife twisting deeper with every thought of his trust in me eroding. I'd hidden my wealth to give him a normal life, but now that secrecy was a weapon in Lauren's hands, turning my love for him into a liability. The third shock hit like a lightning strike, amplifying the chaos. As I followed Rachel to the greenhouse, Tessa's voice cut through the night, her tone dripping with crude malice. "Yo, Carter, you dumb bastard," she sneered, spotting me before I could retreat. "You thought you could play us with your low-rent daddy act? Lauren's got your number, and we're about to cash in big hundreds of millions, baby, straight from your secret stash." She laughed, a hyena's cackle, as the reporter, a weaselly guy named Mitch Callahan, scribbled furiously, his eyes gleaming with the promise of a career-making expose. But the real blow came when Tessa dropped her final bomb. "Oh, and Ethan? He's in on it. Lauren's got him wrapped around her finger, feeding her intel on your humble lifestyle." "Ethan? My son?" The accusation was a sledgehammer, shattering my last shred of composure. I stumbled back, my breath ragged, as Rachel grabbed my arm, whispering, "She's lying, Mr. Carter. Ethan would never betray you. I know him." But the seed of doubt took root. a poison spreading through my veins. Had I been so blind that even my own son could turn against me? My internal struggle was a maelstrom, tearing me apart from the inside. I'd spent my life shielding Ethan, sacrificing Flash for stability, only to watch my secrecy become a trap. The guilt was crushing. Had my silence pushed him toward Lauren's lies? Had I failed him by not trusting him with the truth? The rage was just as fierce, a burning need to crush Lauren, Tessa, Derek, and now this reporter for daring to drag my family through their mud. But the deepest wound was the fear that Ethan might be complicit, that the boy I'd raised to value honesty could have been seduced by Lauren's schemes. I pictured his face, the way he'd looked at me as a kid, full of trust, and the thought of losing that forever was a grief I couldn't bear. My hands shook as I fought the urge to confront Tessa right there, to scream that she'd never touch my son or my fortune. But Rachel's steady grip on my arm anchored me, her loyalty a flicker of hope in the darkness. As Tessa and Mitch slunk back toward the reception, I turned to Rachel, my voice hoarse. "Get me proof Ethan's not involved. I need to know my son's still mine." She nodded, her eyes fierce with determination. Jim stepped closer, his voice low. "William, we've got to move fast. Lauren's crew is escalating SEC filings, tabloid leaks, maybe even a lawsuit. They're betting you'll cave to save Ethan. The stakes were astronomical, $2 billion. My son's heart, my legacy." But as the ocean wind whipped around me, I felt a fire ignite. Lauren thought she'd cornered a tired old man, but she'd awakened a warrior. I'd built my empire from code and grit, and I'd tear hers down before she could touch my son. The wedding was over, but the war had just begun. The Cape Cod night had turned suffocating, the ocean's rhythmic crash now a cruel metronome to the chaos unraveling my world. Lauren's betrayal, Tessa's vicious taunts, and Derek Voss's shadowy schemes had already cracked the foundation of my carefully hidden $2 billion empire, but the accusation that Ethan, my own son, might be complicit in their plot was a wound I couldn't staunch. My heart thundered as I stood by the greenhouse, Rachel's reassuring words, "Ethan would never betray you," clashing with Tessa's venomous claim that he was feeding Lauren intel. The doubt was a poison, seeping into every memory of my boy's trusting smile, and I hated myself for letting it take root. I'd built my life around protecting Ethan, keeping my wealth a secret to give him a shot at authenticity. But now that choice felt like a betrayal of its own. Had I pushed him into Lauren's trap by hiding who I really was? The guilt was a lead weight, but the rage was a fire I could barely contain. I slipped back toward the reception, my polished loafers silent on the gravel path, desperate to find Ethan and see the truth in his eyes. But before I could reach the glowing tent, the first shock hit like a gunshot. Charles Mitchell, Lauren's father, intercepted me near the estate's rose garden, his face a mask of false concern, barely hiding a predatory glint. "Carter, you sneaky old bastard," he sneered, his Boston accent thick with street bravado. "Thought you could play the poor widower card while sitting on billions, huh? Lauren's got you by the balls, and we're gonna squeeze till you cough up $100 million. $100 million! The number was a slap, not just for its audacity, but for what it revealed. Charles wasn't just a bystander. He was in on Lauren's scheme, a willing accomplice ready to gut me for a payout. My stomach churned as I realized the entire Mitchell family was a pack of wolves, circling my fortune while Ethan danced inside, oblivious to their teeth. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd thought possible, a raw ache that made my hands tremble. Charles had sat across from me at family dinners, toasting Ethan's future, all while plotting to bleed me dry. I wanted to grab him by his overpriced tuxedo and scream that he'd never touch my son's legacy, but the image of Ethan's happiness held me back. If I exposed Charles now, would it shatter Ethan's trust in everyone, including me? My mind was a battlefield, torn between protecting my son and obliterating the vipers who dared to use him. I forced a calm nod, muttering, "We'll talk later," and pushed past him, my heart pounding with a resolve to end this before it destroyed us both. The second shock came as I re-entered the reception tent, the clink of champagne glasses, and forced laughter a jarring contrast to the storm inside me. Rachel, ever loyal, caught my eye from the bar and slipped me a folded napkin with a scrawled note. "Check Ethan's phone. Lauren's been texting him about your secrets." My breath caught, the words a fresh dagger. I spotted Ethan across the room, laughing with his groomsmen, his phone tucked in his suit pocket. The thought of invading his privacy made my stomach twist, but the fear that he was part of Lauren's plot was worse. I waited until he stepped away to the restroom. Then, with a guilt that burned like acid, I swiped his phone from the table. The screen lit up with a text from Lauren, sent just minutes ago. Babe, push your dad tonight. Get him to spill about his money. We're so close to the jackpot. The words were a gut punch, proof that Lauren was manipulating Ethan. But worse was the reply he'd started typing but hadn't sent. I don't know, Lauren. This feels wrong. My heart shattered relief that he wasn't fully complicit, mixed with agony that he was even considering her game. I deleted the text, my hands shaking, and returned the phone, but the damage was done. Ethan was caught in her web, and I'd failed to shield him. The drama exploded with the third shock, as Derek Voss himself appeared, swaggering through the crowd like a shark in a suit. He cornered me near the dessert table, his voice a low growl laced with street-smart venom. Yo, Carter, you washed-up fraud, he spat, his breath reeking of whiskey. You think you can hide your billions forever? Lauren's got proof you dodged taxes on $500 million in offshore deals, and we're gonna bury you unless you fork over $200 million by Monday. $200 million. The lie was outrageous, a fabricated scandal meant to blackmail me into submission. But the real blow was Derek's next line. Oh, and your boy Ethan? He's been meeting with my lawyer, thinking he's protecting you. Kid's so gullible, he's handing us the keys to your vault. My vision went red, the implication that Ethan was unknowingly aiding their scheme of betrayal that felt like losing him all over again. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to deck Derek right there, the crowd be damned. But the thought of Ethan's confusion, his trust in Lauren twisted against me, kept me rooted. My internal struggle was a crucible, burning away any illusion of control. I'd spent decades building a fortress around Ethan, only to watch it crumble under Lauren's calculated strikes. The guilt was unbearable. Had my secrecy made him doubt me enough to fall for her lies? The rage was just as fierce, a primal need to protect my son by crushing every player in this sick game. But the deepest pain was the fear that Ethan's love for Lauren might blind him to her deceit, leaving me to fight alone. I pictured him as a boy, running to me after a nightmare, and the thought of him turning away now was a grief too heavy to name. Rachel's voice broke through, soft but fierce. Miss Carter, I hacked into Tessa's email. She's got a meeting with a senator's aide tomorrow to push for an IRS audit on you. An audit? Another layer of betrayal, this time threatening to drag my empire into a public circus. I looked at Rachel, her loyalty a lifeline, and nodded. Get me everything you can on that meeting. As Derek slunk back into the crowd, smirking like he'd already won, Jim appeared at my side, his face grim. William, they're moving faster than we thought. Lawrence filed a preliminary complaint with the SEC, claiming you manipulated Mitchell Enterprises stock before the buyout. It's a lie, but it's enough to trigger an investigation. The stakes were now stratospheric. $2 billion, my son's heart, my reputation. I straightened, the fire in my chest blazing hotter. Lauren, Charles, Tessa, and Derek thought they'd trap me, but they'd underestimated a father's love. I'd built my fortune from nothing, and I'd burn it all down before I let them destroy Ethan. The reception glittered on, but for me, it was a war zone, and I was ready to fight dirty. The reception tent's golden glow faded behind me as I stumbled into the cool Cape Cod night, the weight of Lauren's schemes, Charles's complicity, Tessa's venom, and Derek Voss's threats crushing me like a collapsing skyscraper. My $2 billion empire, built to protect Ethan, was now a noose tightening around us both, with every new betrayal slicing deeper into my soul. The text on Ethan's phone, "Babe, push your dad tonight," haunted me. A flicker of doubt that my son might be swayed by Lauren's lies, even if his unsent reply suggested he was wrestling with her demands. My heart was a raw wound, torn between love for Ethan and fury at the vultures circling him. I'd hidden my wealth to give him a life free of greed's shadow. But that choice now felt like a betrayal of my own making, leaving him vulnerable to a woman who saw him as a stepping stone to my fortune. The guilt gnawed at me, a relentless voice whispering that I'd failed as a father, but the rage burned hotter, urging me to fight before Lauren's web ensnared us completely. I retreated to my Lexus, parked discreetly behind the estate's guest house, needing a moment to breathe. But the first shock slammed into me like a wrecking ball. Jim Thornton, my rock-solid advisor, slid into the passenger seat, his face pale as he thrust a manila envelope into my hands. "William, you need to see this. Lauren's been digging into your old patent deals way back to the 1990s. She's got a forged document claiming you stole the encryption algorithm from a dead colleague, Mike Reynolds. Mike, the name was a ghost from my Silicon Valley days, a brilliant coder who died in a car accident before our patent was finalized. The accusation was a lie, but a vicious one, designed to paint me as a thief who'd built my billions on stolen genius." My chest tightened, the betrayal stinging not just for its audacity, but for its cruelty. Lauren wasn't just after my money. She was rewriting my life to destroy my legacy. I pictured Ethan reading that lie in a tabloid, his faith in me crumbling, and the pain was a physical ache, like a heart attack I couldn't stop. The drama escalated as Jim's phone buzzed with a new alert, his fingers flying across the screen. Risk it, William. It gets worse. Lauren's crew sent an anonymous tip to a congressional staffer, alleging you funneled $100 million through illegal offshore accounts to dodge taxes. $100 million. The number was a gut punch. Another fabricated scandal meant to trigger a federal investigation and smear my name. But the real blow came with Jim's next words. They've got a witness, Greg Harper, your junior analyst. He's claiming he saw you sign off on those accounts. Greg, the kid I'd mentored, trusted, now a traitor feeding Lauren's lies for a paycheck. The betrayal was a knife in my back, twisting deeper because I'd seen Greg as a surrogate son, someone I'd hoped to guide like Ethan. My hands shook as I gripped the envelope, the weight of his disloyalty mingling with the fear that Ethan might believe these lies, that he might see me as a criminal instead of the father who'd sacrificed everything for him. The second shock hit as Rachel Nguyen slipped into the back seat, her eyes wide with urgency, her voice a hushed whisper. Mr. Carter, I got into Tessa's cloud drive. She's got photos, staged ones of you, meeting with a known money launderer at a Boston dive bar last year. They're planning to leak them to the Globe tomorrow. Photos. My mind reeled, conjuring images of a setup I'd never seen coming. A meeting I vaguely recalled with a shady contact Derek had pushed on me, claiming it was a business favor. The realization hit like a freight train. Derek had orchestrated that meeting, planting me in a frame to bolster their blackmail scheme. The betrayal was a suffocating weight, not just from Derek's cunning, but from the dawning horror that my own decisions, my trust in Greg, my handshake with a stranger had given Lauren's crew the ammunition to destroy me. I pictured Ethan's face, his trust in me shattered by doctored photos, and the grief was a tidal wave, drowning me in regret for every secret I'd kept to protect him. The third shock was a gut-wrenching explosion, delivered by none other than Evelyn Mitchell, Lauren's mother, who emerged from the shadows of the guest house, her designer heels clicking like gunshots on the gravel. Well, look at you, Carter, you slimy old crook, she spat, her voice dripping with Southeast Street venom. Thought you could screw us over with your secret billions? Lauren's got a whole dossier on you, shady deals worth $300 million, backroom bribes, the works. You're gonna pay big, or we'll torch your name and Ethan's career. $300 million. The lie was monstrous, a fabricated narrative that painted me as a mobster, not a father. But the real dagger was her final jab. Your precious Ethan? He's been slipping Lauren your bank statements for weeks, thinking he's saving your ass. My world tilted. The suggestion that Ethan was knowingly feeding her my financial secrets, a betrayal that felt like losing him entirely. I wanted to scream, to call her a liar, but the seed of doubt sprouted thorns, piercing my heart with the fear that my son might be lost to me. My internal struggle was a crucible of fire and ice, burning with rage and freezing with despair. I'd built my empire to give Ethan freedom, but every choice to hide my wealth now felt like a brick in the wall between us. The guilt was a relentless tide. Had my secrecy made him doubt my love, pushing him toward Lauren's manipulation? The fury was just as fierce, a primal urge to crush Evelyn, Lauren, Derek, and Greg for daring to weaponize my son against me. But the deepest wound was the terror that Ethan's trust in me was slipping away, that he might believe their lies over the father who'd raised him. I saw him as a boy, clinging to me after his mother's death, and the thought of him turning away now was a grief that hollowed me out. I wanted to run to him, to beg him to see the truth, but the fear of shattering his wedding night held me back. A father's love, warring with a warrior's instinct. Are you enjoying the story so far? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Just drop a quick comment below to share how you feel. It only takes a few seconds, but your words give me the motivation and inspiration to make every chapter more thrilling and engaging. Go ahead, let me know what's on your mind. And now, let's dive back into the story. Rachel's voice cut through, steady and fierce. Mr. Carter, I found Ethan's cloud backups. He's been saving your old emails, not bank statements, sentimental stuff, not financial. Evelyn's lying to break you. Her loyalty was a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge, but the relief was fleeting. Jim leaned in, his voice grim. William, they're filing a class action lawsuit tomorrow, claiming you defrauded investors out of $500 million. They've got fake witnesses lined up, including Greg. $500 million. The scale of their deceit was staggering, a coordinated attack to force me into a corner. I straightened, my resolve hardening like steel. Lauren's crew thought they'd trapped me, but they didn't know William Carter. I'd built my fortune from code and grit. and I'd dismantle their lies before they touched my son. The night was dark, but my fight was just beginning. The Cape Cod night had become a suffocating cage, the distant crash of waves, now a mocking echo of the chaos tearing through my soul. Lauren's intricate web of deceit, woven with Charles's complicity, Tessa's vicious taunts, Derek Voss's calculated threats, and Greg Harper's betrayal, had turned my $2 billion empire into a battlefield where my son Ethan was the ultimate casualty. Rachel's assurance that Ethan hadn't betrayed me with bank statements offered a fleeting lifeline, but the fear that he was caught in Lauren's manipulations gnawed at me like a relentless beast. My heart was a furnace of grief and rage, burning for the boy I'd raised to stand tall, now ensnared by a woman who saw him as a pawn in her hunt for my fortune. I'd hidden my wealth to protect him, but that secrecy now felt like a chain I'd forged myself, binding us both to this nightmare. The guilt was a tidal wave had my silence driven Ethan into Lauren's arms, leaving him blind to her true face. I wanted to find him, to shake him awake from her spell, but the dread of shattering his world held me frozen, a father torn between love and the need to fight. I slipped away from the guest house, my Lexus a silent refuge, as I drove toward my Boston brownstone, the city lights blurring through the tears. I refused to let fall, but the first shock hit like a landmine before I could reach the highway. Jim Thornton called, his voice taut with urgency. "William, Lauren's escalated. She's got a hacker some lowlife named Vince Malone inside your personal server. He's pulled encrypted files on your biotech investments, claiming they're proof you rigged clinical trials for a $1 billion drug patent. $1 billion. The accusation was a grotesque lie, but its audacity made my blood run cold. My biotech ventures were clean, built on years of meticulous research, but Lauren's crew was crafting a narrative to paint me as a corporate villain. The betrayal stung deeper because those files were sacred. Ellen and I had poured our hearts into those investments, dreaming of cures that could outlive us. To see them twisted into a weapon against me was a desecration, and the thought of Ethan hearing these lies, believing his father was a fraud, was a wound that bled raw. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, as I fought the urge to turn back and confront Lauren in front of her glittering guests. The drama surged as Jim's next words landed like a second blow. "There's more, William. Vince found an old email chain between you and Ellen where she joked about burying the competition. Lauren's team is spinning it as evidence you sabotaged rival companies, costing them $500 million in losses." $500 million. The distortion of Ellen's playful words, her wit, her fire into a weapon was a betrayal that cut to my core. I could almost hear her voice, teasing me in our cramped Silicon Valley garage, and now Lauren was using her memory to fuel her greed. My chest ached with a grief so deep it threatened to drown me. The image of Ethan reading those twisted emails a nightmare I couldn't escape. I'd kept my wealth hidden to preserve his innocence, but now that choice was a shackle, chaining me to a fight I wasn't sure I could win. My mind screamed to expose Lauren's lies, to protect Ellen's legacy, but the fear of dragging Ethan into this cesspool kept me silent, a father's love warring with a warrior's instinct. The second shock came as I pulled into my brownstone's driveway, Rachel texting me with a frantic update. "Mr. Carter, I trailed Vince Malone to a diner off Route 6. He's meeting Lauren's lawyer, Carla Reyes, and they're drafting a whistleblower claim to the FDA, accusing you of faking drug trial data for a $2 billion payout." $2 billion. The scale of their lies was staggering, a coordinated assault to cripple my empire and smear my name. But the real gut punch was Rachel's next line. "Carla's got a recording Ethan talking to Lauren about your shady investments, saying he's worried you're hiding something big. Ethan, my son." The suggestion that he was confiding in Lauren, even out of concern, was a betrayal that felt like losing him all over again. I stumbled into my living room, the familiar comfort of my modest home, now a mockery of the life I'd built. My heart pounded with a mix of fury and despair. Had I pushed Ethan away by keeping him in the dark? The guilt was a vice, squeezing tighter with every thought of him doubting me, his trust eroded by Lauren's poison. The third shock was a brutal explosion, delivered by none other than Carla Reyes herself, who appeared at my doorstep, her sleek business suit a stark contrast to the venom in her voice. "Yo, Carter, you washed-up hustler," she sneered, her South Boston drawl dripping with street grit. "You think you can dodge us with your fake-ass humble act? We've got you on tape, bribing FDA officials for $3 billion in dirty profits. Hand over $400 million, or we'll make sure Ethan knows his daddy's a crook." $400 million. The lie was monstrous, a fabricated scandal meant to break me. But her final jab was the killing blow. "Your boy's already half convinced you're a liar. He's been spilling his guts to Lauren, thinking he's saving you from yourself. My vision blurred, the suggestion that Ethan was unwittingly aiding their scheme a dagger through my heart. I wanted to slam the door in her face, to scream that she'd never touch my son, but the fear that Ethan might believe her lies rooted me to the spot, my hands trembling with rage and sorrow. My internal struggle was a tempest, tearing me apart from within. I'd built my empire to give Ethan a life free of greed's taint, but every secret I'd kept now felt like a brick in the wall between us. The guilt was crushing. Had my silence made him doubt my love, pushing him to confide in Lauren? The fury was a wildfire, urging me to crush Carla, Lauren, and their entire crew for daring to use my son against me. But the deepest pain was the terror that Ethan's faith in me was slipping away, that he might see me as the villain Carla painted. I pictured him as a child, his tiny hand in mine, trusting me to chase away the monsters, and the thought of him turning away now was a grief that hollowed me out. I wanted to run to him, to beg him to see the truth, but the fear of shattering his marriage kept me still, a father's heart at war with a titan's resolve. Rachel's voice broke through as she called, her tone fierce with loyalty. "Mr. Carter, I've got Vince's laptop. He's got no real proof, just doctored emails and fake audio. I can expose them." Her devotion was a beacon, but Jim's warning followed like a storm cloud. "William, Carla's pushing for an emergency injunction to freeze your assets. They're betting you'll cave to protect Ethan." The stakes were apocalyptic. $2 billion, my son's trust, my wife's legacy. I straightened, my resolve forged in fire. Lauren's crew thought they'd cornered me, but they'd awakened a giant. I'd built my fortune from nothing, and I'd bury their lies before they touched my son. The night was dark, but my war was just beginning. The Boston dawn broke over my brownstone, painting the sky in streaks of gray that mirrored the storm raging in my chest. Lauren's relentless assault, her forged documents, fake whistleblower claims, and doctored photos had turned my $2 billion empire into a house of cards teetering on the edge of collapse. The accusation that Ethan was confiding in her, even out of worry, was a wound that bled fresh with every heartbeat, twisting my love for him into a weapon against me. Rachel's proof that Ethan hadn't betrayed me outright was a fragile thread of hope, but the fear that Lauren's lies had poisoned his trust kept me awake, staring at the ceiling as the city stirred. I'd hidden my wealth to give him a life free of vultures, but now that secrecy felt like a betrayal of my own making, leaving him vulnerable to a woman who'd turned his marriage into a heist. My heart was a battlefield, torn between the urge to shield Ethan from the truth and the burning need to crush Lauren's schemes before they destroyed us both. I sat at my kitchen table, the coffee gone cold in my favorite Red Sox mug, when the first shock hit like a Molotov cocktail. Jim Thornton burst through my front door, his tie askew, clutching a laptop that glowed with a new nightmare. "William, Lauren's crew leaked a fake audit report to Bloomberg, claiming you hid $1 billion in unreported income from your real estate deals." $1 billion? The lie was colossal, a fabricated scandal designed to spark a media frenzy and force me into a corner. But the real gut punch was Jim's next revelation. They've got a plant in Ethan's marketing firm, Lila Bennett, his assistant. She's been feeding Lauren his work emails, twisting them to look like he's been digging into your finances for her. Lila, the quiet, efficient woman I'd met at Ethan's office Christmas party, always smiling, always helpful. The betrayal was a knife in my ribs, not just for her disloyalty, but for the way it implicated Ethan, painting him as a pawn in Lauren's game. My hands shook as I gripped the table, the image of Ethan's proud grin at his latest promotion, now a cruel reminder of how deeply this web had ensnared him. Had I failed him by not warning him about people like Lila? The guilt was a lead weight, dragging me under as I pictured him blindsided by her treachery. The drama surged as Rachel called, her voice trembling with urgency over the speakerphone. "Mr. Carter, I hacked into Carla Reyes' firm server. They're drafting a defamation lawsuit against you, claiming you slandered the Mitchell family to cover up a $500 million Ponzi scheme." $500 million. The accusation was a grotesque fiction, but its audacity made my blood boil. Rachel's next words were a sledgehammer. "They've got a voice recording Ethan talking to Lila, saying he's scared you're in over your head with big money deals. They're editing it to sound like he's accusing you of fraud." My heart stopped. The suggestion that Ethan's innocent worries were being twisted into evidence against me, a betrayal that felt like losing him entirely. I pictured him in his office, trusting Lila as a colleague, unaware she was a snake feeding his words to Lauren. The grief was a tidal wave, drowning me in regret for every secret I'd kept to protect him. My mind screamed to confront Lila, to expose her to Ethan, but the fear of shattering his faith in his own judgment kept me silent, a father's love warring with a titan's fury. The second shock came as I stepped outside to clear my head, the crisp Boston air doing little to cool the fire in my chest. A black SUV idled across the street, and out stepped Mitch Callahan, the sleazy reporter from the wedding, his smirk as oily as his comb-over. "Yo, Carter, you shady old prick," he sneered, his voice pure Dorchester grit. "Thought you could dodge the spotlight? We've got proof you laundered $3 billion through fake charities, and Ethan's ready to spill it all for a cut of the Mitchells' payout." $3 billion? The lie was monstrous, a tabloid-ready scandal meant to bury me. But his claim about Ethan was the real dagger, a vicious twist that made my knees buckle. I wanted to grab him by his cheap tie and demand the truth, but Rachel's text flashed on my phone. "Mitch is bluffing about Ethan." I found his notes. He's got nothing but edited audio. Her loyalty was a lifeline, but the doubt lingered, a poison seeping into my love for my son. Had I pushed him away by hiding my empire? The guilt was a vice, squeezing tighter with every thought of him caught in this nightmare. The third shock was a brutal detonation, delivered by a new player, Vanessa Cole, a high-profile PR consultant who'd once pitched me on a charity campaign. She appeared at my doorstep, her designer coat barely hiding the venom in her smile. "Carter, you washed-up scam artist," she spat, her Southie accent sharp as broken glass. "You think you can play the humble dad while hoarding $4 billion in dirty money? Lauren's got a video Ethan crying to her about how you've been lying to him his whole life. We're dropping it on X tonight unless you cough up $500 million. $500 million. The lie was apocalyptic, but the image of Ethan crying, manipulated by Lauren's crocodile tears, was a wound that bled raw. My vision blurred, rage and despair colliding as I pictured my son, vulnerable and hurt, being used as a weapon against me. I wanted to scream at Vanessa, to tear apart her lies, but the fear that Ethan's pain was real stopped me cold. My heart ached with a grief so deep it threatened to break me. The thought of him feeling betrayed by me a nightmare I couldn't wake from. My internal struggle was a maelstrom, tearing me apart from within. I'd built my empire to give Ethan freedom, but every secret I'd kept now felt like a chain binding him to Lauren's schemes. The guilt was crushing. Had my silence made him doubt my love, leaving him open to her manipulation? The fury was a wildfire, urging me to crush Vanessa, Mitch, Lila, and Lauren for daring to exploit my son's heart. But the deepest pain was the terror that Ethan might never trust me again, that he might see me as the villain Vanessa's video painted. I pictured him as a boy, his laughter filling our old Cambridge apartment, and the thought of losing that bond was a sorrow that hollowed me out. Rachel's voice broke through as she arrived, breathless, with a USB drive. "Mr. Carter, I've got the raw video. Ethan's not accusing you, he's defending you, saying he trusts you no matter what." Her loyalty was a beacon, but Jim's warning followed. "William, Vanessa's pushing for a public Senate hearing. They're betting you'll cave to save Ethan's reputation. The stakes were cataclysmic $2 billion, my son's trust, my legacy." I straightened, my resolve forged in steel. Lauren's crew thought they'd broken me, but they'd awakened a father who'd burn the world to protect his son. The dawn was cold, but my fight was red hot. The Boston morning light filtered through my brownstone's windows, casting jagged shadows that mirrored the turmoil shredding my soul. Lauren's relentless campaign, forged audits, fake whistleblower claims, doctored videos had turned my $2 billion empire into a ticking bomb, with Ethan caught in the blast radius. Rachel's proof that Ethan was defending me, not betraying me, was a faint pulse of hope, but the image of him crying to Lauren, manipulated by her lies, was a wound that bled with every breath. My heart was a furnace of grief and rage, burning for the son I'd raised to stand tall, now tangled in a web spun by a woman who saw him as a key to my fortune. I'd hidden my wealth to shield him from greed's claws, but that choice now felt like a betrayal of my own design, leaving him vulnerable to a predator in a wedding dress. The guilt was a relentless storm had my silence made him question my love, opening the door to Lauren's deceit. I wanted to find him, to pull him from her grasp, but the fear of shattering his world kept me rooted, a father torn between protection and vengeance. I paced my living room, the hardwood creaking under my restless steps, when the first shock detonated like a grenade. Jim Thornton called, his voice a low growl of panic. "William, Lauren's crew hacked your personal cloud account. They've got a fake contract claiming you sold a biotech patent for $1 billion under the table, bypassing federal regulators. $1 billion. The lie was audacious, a fabricated deal meant to paint me as a rogue tycoon. But Jim's next words were a sledgehammer. They've got a new player, Ethan's old college buddy, Nate Sullivan. He's swearing to the SEC that he overheard you bragging about the deal at a bar. Nate, the kid who'd crashed on our couch during Ethan's grad school days, always quick with a laugh and a beer. The betrayal was a gut punch, not just for his disloyalty, but for how it tainted my memories of those late-night talks when I'd thought he was family. My chest ached. The image of Ethan trusting Nate, now a cruel reminder of how deeply this conspiracy ran. Had I been so blind to let these snakes into our lives? The guilt was a vice, squeezing tighter as I pictured Ethan blindsided by yet another friend's treachery. The drama exploded as Rachel burst through my door, her hoodie damp with sweat, clutching a burner phone she'd swiped from Vince Malone's car. Mr. Carter, I intercepted a call between Lauren and a new accomplice, Senator Jack Riley's chief of staff, Emma Torres. They're pushing for a federal probe into your real estate holdings, claiming you laundered $500 million through shell companies. $500 million. The accusation was a grotesque fiction, but its scale made my blood boil. Rachel's voice cracked as she added, Emma's got a text from Ethan, begging Lauren to stop digging into your past because he's scared it'll destroy you. My heart shattered. The proof that Ethan was fighting for me, both a relief and a dagger. He was caught in Lauren's web, pleading with her out of love for me, unaware she was using his words to tighten her noose. The grief was a tidal wave, drowning me in regret for every secret I'd kept to protect him. My mind screamed to confront Lauren, to expose her to Ethan, but the fear of breaking his heart kept me silent, a father's love clashing with a warrior's fury. The second shock hit as I opened my laptop, desperate to trace Emma's involvement, only to find an email from an anonymous account. It contained a video grainy but devastating of me at a charity gala last year, shaking hands with a known lobbyist, edited to look like I was slipping him a bribe worth $2 billion. The caption read, "Pay $500 million, or this goes viral on X by noon." $500 million. The threat was apocalyptic, a public execution of my reputation. But the real blow was a text attached to the email, claiming Ethan had leaked the gala footage to Lauren, thinking it was harmless networking. My vision blurred. The suggestion that my son had unknowingly aided her scheme, a betrayal that felt like losing him entirely. I wanted to scream, to call the text a lie, but the doubt was a poison, seeping into my love for Ethan. Rachel, sensing my collapse, grabbed my arm. "It's fake, Mr. Carter. I traced the IP. It's Vince, not Ethan. He's trying to break you." Her loyalty was a lifeline, but the pain lingered, a raw wound as I pictured Ethan's trusting face, twisted by Lauren's manipulation. The third shock was a brutal explosion, delivered by Emma Torres herself, who appeared on my doorstep, her tailored blazer, a thin veneer over her venomous grin. "Yo, Carter, you slimy old hustler," she sneered, her Boston street drawl cutting like a switchblade. "Think you can play the broke-ass dad while sitting on $4 billion in dirty cash? We've got Ethan on record, crying to Lauren about how you've been dodging taxes his whole life. Fork over $600 million, or we'll make sure he testifies against you in court." $600 million. The lie was monstrous, but her claim about Ethan was the killing blow, a vicious twist that made my knees buckle. I pictured him, vulnerable and scared, his words warped into a weapon against me, and the grief was a physical ache, like my heart was being carved out. I wanted to slam the door in her face, to scream that she'd never touch my son, but the fear that Ethan might believe her lies froze me, my hands trembling with rage and despair. My internal struggle was a crucible, burning away any illusion of safety. I'd built my empire to give Ethan freedom, but every secret I'd kept now felt like a chain dragging him into Lauren's trap. The guilt was crushing. Had my silence made him doubt my integrity, leaving him open to Emma's poison? The fury was a wildfire, urging me to crush Emma, Lauren, Nate, and their entire crew for exploiting my son's love. But the deepest pain was the terror that Ethan's trust in me was crumbling, that he might see me as the criminal Emma painted. I saw him as a boy, his eyes wide with faith in me, and the thought of losing that bond was a sorrow that gutted me. Rachel's voice broke through, fierce and steady. "Mr. Carter, I've got Emma's emails to Riley. They're planning to bribe a judge for the probe. We can stop them." Her loyalty was a beacon, but Jim's warning followed. "William, they're filing for a court order to seize your assets tomorrow. They're betting you'll cave to save Ethan." The stakes were cataclysmic. $2 billion, my son's heart, my legacy. I straightened, my resolve forged in steel. Lauren's crew thought they'd broken me, but they'd awakened a father who'd burned the world to save his son. The morning was cold, but my fight was a furnace. The Boston morning felt like a noose tightening around my neck. The city's hum, a cruel backdrop to the war, tearing my world apart. Lauren's relentless onslaught, fake contracts, doctored videos, and fabricated probes had turned my $2 billion empire into a house fire, with Ethan trapped in the flames. Rachel's proof that Ethan was defending me, not betraying me, was a fragile lifeline, but the image of him begging Lauren to stop, only to be manipulated, was a wound that bled raw. My heart was a crucible of grief and rage, burning for the son I'd raised, to be honest. Now ensnared by a woman who saw him as a ticket to my fortune. I'd hidden my wealth to protect him from the world's greed, but that choice now felt like a betrayal of my own making, leaving him vulnerable to a predator who'd turned his love into a weapon. The guilt was a relentless tide, had my silence pushed him into her arms, making him doubt the father who'd given everything to keep him safe. I wanted to run to him, to tear him from her grasp, but the fear of shattering his heart kept me frozen, a father caught between love and vengeance. I stood in my brownstone study, the walls lined with photos of Ethan's childhood, when the first shock hit like a shotgun blast. Jim Thornton texted, his message urgent. William, Lauren's crew leaked a fake IRS report to CNN, claiming you evaded taxes on $1 billion in crypto trades. $1 billion. The lie was monstrous, a public crucifixion meant to bury me under scrutiny. But Jim's next line was a gut punch. They've got a new traitor, your old accountant, Sarah Klein. She's testifying you ordered her to hide $500 million in offshore accounts. Sarah, the woman who'd balanced my books for decades, who'd sent Ethan birthday cards with $20 bills tucked inside. The betrayal was a knife in my gut, not just for her disloyalty, but for how it tainted every memory of her loyalty. My chest ached, the image of Ethan trusting Sarah's warm smile now, a cruel reminder of how deeply this conspiracy ran. Had I been so blind to let her into our lives? The guilt was a lead weight, dragging me under as I pictured Ethan blindsided by yet another trusted figure's treachery. The drama surged as Rachel burst in, her eyes wild with panic, clutching a USB drive. Mr. Carter, I cracked Vince Malone's email. He's working with a crooked FBI agent, Tony Russo, to plant evidence of a $2 billion money laundering ring tied to your biotech firm. $2 billion. The accusation was apocalyptic, a fabricated crime meant to trigger a federal raid. Rachel's voice cracked as she added, They've got a forged email from Ethan to Lauren, saying he's done covering for your shady deals. It's fake, but they're sending it to the FBI. My heart shattered. The proof that Ethan was being framed as a whistleblower against me, a betrayal that felt like losing him entirely. I pictured him in his office, trusting Lauren with his fears, unaware she was twisting his words into a noose. The grief was a tidal wave, drowning me in regret for every secret I'd kept to protect him. My mind screamed to confront Tony, to expose his corruption, but the fear of dragging Ethan into a federal investigation kept me silent, a father's love clashing with a warrior's fury. The second shock hit as I opened my laptop, desperate to trace Tony's involvement, only to find a hacked security feed from my own home office. It showed me signing papers, edited to look like I was approving a $3 billion bribe to a foreign government. The email attached demanded $700 million to keep it off X. $700 million. The threat was a guillotine, poised to sever my reputation. But the real blow was a note claiming Ethan had given Lauren access to my home security system, thinking he was helping her understand you. My vision blurred. The suggestion that my son had unknowingly handed her the keys to my privacy, a betrayal that gutted me. I wanted to call it a lie, but the doubt was a poison, seeping into my love for Ethan. Rachel, sensing my collapse, grabbed my hand. It's fake, Mr. Carter. I traced the feed, it's Vince's work, not Ethan's. Her loyalty was a lifeline, but the pain lingered, a raw wound as I pictured Ethan's trusting face, twisted by Lauren's manipulation. The third shock was a brutal detonation delivered by Tony Russo himself, who swaggered up to my brownstone, his badge glinting like a predator's teeth. Yo, Carter, you filthy old crook, he sneered, his Southie accent dripping with venom. Think you can hide your $5 billion in dirty cash? We've got Ethan on tape. Tellin' Lauren he's ready to turn you in for tax fraud. Pay $800 million, or we'll lock you up and let your boy watch. $800 million? The lie was cataclysmic, but his claim about Ethan was the killing blow, a vicious twist that made my knees buckle. I pictured my son, scared and manipulated, his words warped into a weapon against me, and the grief was a physical ache, like my heart was being torn apart. I wanted to slam my fist into Tony's smug face, to scream that he'd never touch Ethan. But the fear that my son might believe these lies froze me, my hands trembling with rage and despair. My internal struggle was a maelstrom, tearing me apart from within. I'd built my empire to give Ethan freedom, But every secret I'd kept now felt like a chain dragging him into Lauren's trap. The guilt was crushing had my silence made him doubt my integrity, leaving him open to Tony's poison. The fury was a wildfire, urging me to crush Tony, Lauren, Sarah, and their entire crew for exploiting my son's love. But the deepest pain was the terror that Ethan's faith in me was crumbling, that he might see me as the criminal Tony painted. I saw him as a boy, his laughter echoing in our old backyard, and the thought of losing that bond was a sorrow that gutted me. Rachel's voice broke through, fierce and steady. "Mr. Carter, I've got Tony's burner phone records. He's been taking bribes from Lauren for months. We can expose him." Her loyalty was a beacon, but Jim's warning followed. "William, they're pushing for a grand jury indictment by tomorrow. They're betting you'll cave to save Ethan." The stakes were apocalyptic. $2 billion, my son's heart, my legacy. I straightened, my resolve forged in steel. Lauren's crew thought they'd broken me, but they'd awakened a father who'd burn the world to save his son. The morning was cold, but my fight was a furnace. The Boston noon sun beat down on the city, but inside my brownstone, the air felt like a funeral parlor, heavy with the weight of Lauren's relentless war against my $2 billion empire. Her fabricated IRS reports, forged emails, and planted evidence had turned my life into a minefield, with Ethan trapped at the center. Rachel's proof that Ethan was still loyal, fighting for me despite Lauren's manipulations, was a flickering candle in the darkness, but the image of him pleading with her, unaware of her betrayal, was a wound that bled with every heartbeat. My heart was a crucible of rage and sorrow, burning for the son I'd raised, to be honest, now caught in a web spun by a woman who saw him as a key to my fortune. I'd hidden my wealth to shield him from greed's poison, but that secrecy now felt like a betrayal of my own making, leaving him vulnerable to a predator who'd turned his love into a weapon. The guilt was a relentless storm had my silence made him question my integrity, opening the door to Lauren's lies. I wanted to find him, to pull him from her grasp, but the fear of breaking his heart kept me paralyzed, a father torn between love and vengeance. I was nursing a second cup of coffee when the first shock hit like a thunderclap. Jim Thornton called, his voice tight with dread. "William, Lauren's crew sent a fake whistleblower report to the Department of Justice, claiming you bribed regulators to approve a biotech merger worth $1 billion. $1 billion. The lie was gargantuan, a public execution meant to spark a federal manhunt. But Jim's next words were a sledgehammer. "They've got a new traitor, your old lawyer, Paul Dempsey. He's swearing to the DOJ that he helped you hide $500 million in illegal campaign contributions." Paul, the man who'd drafted my first patent contract, who'd toasted Ethan's college graduation with us. The betrayal was a knife in my chest, not just for his disloyalty, but for how it tainted every memory of his steady hand guiding our family through legal storms. My hands shook as I gripped the mug. The image of Ethan trusting Paul's warm chuckle, now a cruel reminder of how deeply this conspiracy ran. Had I been so blind to let him into our lives? The guilt was a lead weight, dragging me under as I pictured Ethan blindsided by yet another trusted figure's treachery. The drama exploded as Rachel texted, her message frantic. "Mr. Carter, I tapped into Carla Reyes' cloud drive. She's got a meeting with a Wall Street Journal editor, planning to leak a story that you crashed a tech startup for a $2 billion profit through insider trading. $2 billion. The accusation was apocalyptic, a fabricated scandal meant to tank my empire's stocks. Rachel's voice cracked over the phone. "They've got a doctored email from Ethan to Lauren saying he's ashamed of your dirty money. It's fake, but they're sending it to the editor today." My heart shattered. The proof that Ethan's loyalty was being twisted into a weapon against me, a betrayal that felt like losing him entirely. I pictured him in his apartment, trusting Lauren with his fears, unaware she was forging his words into a noose. The grief was a tidal wave, drowning me in regret for every secret I'd kept to protect him. My mind screamed to confront Carla, to expose her lies, but the fear of dragging Ethan into a media storm kept me silent, a father's love clashing with a warrior's fury. The second shock hit as Ethan himself called, his voice heavy with confusion. "Dad, Lauren's pushing me to meet her for lunch at the Capitol Grill. She says we need to talk about family finances. What's going on?" My stomach churned, the realization that Lauren was luring him into a trap, a fresh dagger. Before I could respond, a text from an unknown number flashed on my screen, a photo of me at a charity auction, edited to look like I was handing a senator a bribe worth $3 billion, with a demand for $800 million to keep it off CNN. The note claimed Ethan had given Lauren the photo, thinking it was just a fundraiser. My vision blurred, the suggestion that my son had unknowingly handed her another weapon, a betrayal that gutted me. I wanted to call it a lie, but the doubt was a poison, seeping into my love for Ethan. Rachel's voice cut through, fierce and steady. "It's fake, Mr. Carter. I traced the photo, it's Vince's work, not Ethan's." Her loyalty was a lifeline, but the pain lingered, a raw wound as I pictured Ethan's trusting face, twisted by Lauren's manipulation. The third shock was a brutal detonation, delivered at the lunch itself, where I arrived uninvited, my heart pounding as I spotted Lauren and Ethan at a corner table, her designer suit gleaming under the restaurant's chandeliers. She smirked as I approached, her voice dripping with Southie venom. "Well, well, Carter, you shady old bastard," she sneered, loud enough for nearby diners to turn. "Think you can keep your $5 billion in dirty cash from us? Ethan's been spilling your secrets, saying you're a crook who's been lying to him forever. Pay $1 billion, or we'll make sure he testifies against you." $1 billion. The lie was cataclysmic, but her claim about Ethan was the killing blow, a vicious twist that made my knees buckle. Ethan's eyes widened, confusion and hurt flashing across his face as he stammered, "Lauren, what the hell?" I pictured him, vulnerable and blindsided, his words warped into a weapon against me, and the grief was a physical ache, like my heart was being ripped apart. I wanted to grab her by her perfect collar and scream that she'd never touch my son, but the fear that Ethan might believe her lies froze me, my hands trembling with rage and despair. My internal struggle was a maelstrom, tearing me apart from within. I'd built my empire to give Ethan freedom, but every secret I'd kept now felt like a chain dragging him into Lauren's trap. The guilt was crushing. Had my silence made him doubt my love, leaving him open to her poison? The fury was a wildfire, urging me to crush Lauren, Paul, and their entire crew for exploiting my son's heart. But the deepest pain was the terror that Ethan's trust in me was crumbling, that he might see me as the criminal Lauren painted. I saw him as a boy, his laughter echoing in our old backyard, and the thought of losing that bond was a sorrow that gutted me. Rachel slipped into the restaurant, sliding me a note. "I've got Paul's bank records. He's been paid off by Lauren for months." Her loyalty was a beacon, but Jim's text followed. "William, they're pushing for an FBI raid on your office tomorrow. They're betting you'll cave to save Ethan." The stakes were apocalyptic. $2 billion, my son's heart, my legacy. I straightened, my resolve forged in steel, locking eyes with Ethan. "Son, we need to talk alone." Lauren's crew thought they'd broken me, but they'd awakened a father who'd burn the world to save his son. The lunch was a battlefield, and I was ready to fight. The air in the Capitol Grill was thick with tension, the clink of cutlery, a mocking counterpoint to the war, erupting at our corner table. Lauren's vicious lies, fake DOJ reports, forged emails, and doctored bribes had turned my $2 billion empire into a battlefield, with Ethan's heart as the ultimate prize. Rachel's proof that Ethan was loyal, not a traitor, was a faint pulse of hope, but the sight of him across from Lauren, his face etched with confusion and hurt, was a wound that bled raw. My heart was a furnace of grief and rage, burning for the son I'd raised, to be honest, now trapped in a web spun by a woman who saw him as a pawn in her billion-dollar heist. I'd hidden my wealth to protect him from greed's venom, but that secrecy now felt like a betrayal of my own design, leaving him vulnerable to a predator who'd turned his love into a weapon. The guilt was a relentless storm. Had my silence made him doubt my love, opening the door to Lauren's poison? I wanted to pull him away, to shield him from her lies, but the fear of shattering his world kept me tethered, a father torn between love and vengeance. The first shock hit like a thunderbolt as I sat down, Ethan's eyes searching mine for answers. Before I could speak, Charles Mitchell stormed into the restaurant, his face red with fury, flanked by a new figure, Lila Bennett, Ethan's assistant turned traitor. "Yo, Carter, you slimy old crook," Charles bellowed, his Southie accent dripping with street venom. "Think you can dodge us with your fake-ass humble act? We've got proof you funneled $1 billion through a fake charity to bribe senators." $1 billion. The lie was cataclysmic, a public crucifixion meant to bury me. But Lila's sneer was the real dagger. "Ethan's been feeding us your secrets, Carter, crying about how you've been lying to him his whole life. Pay $2 billion, or we'll make sure he buries you in court." $2 billion. The accusation that Ethan was complicit, even unwittingly, was a gut punch that made my vision blur. Ethan's jaw dropped, his voice cracking as he stammered, "Lila, what the hell are you talking about?" I pictured him, vulnerable and blindsided, his trust in his colleague twisted into a weapon against me, and the grief was a physical ache, like my heart was being ripped apart. Had I failed him by not warning him about snakes like Lila? The drama surged as Rachel slipped into the booth beside me, her eyes blazing with defiance as she slid a tablet across the table. "Mr. Carter, I hacked Lila's phone. She's been recording Ethan's private calls, editing them to sound like he's accusing you of fraud." The revelation was a bombshell, proof that Lila's betrayal ran deeper than I'd feared. But Rachel's next words were a sledgehammer. "They've got a fake video of you meeting a cartel boss, claiming you laundered $3 billion through your real estate deals. They're sending it to the FBI unless you pay $1 billion. $3 billion. The lie was apocalyptic, a fabricated crime meant to trigger a federal raid. Ethan's face paled, his voice barely a whisper. "Dad, is this true?" The question was a dagger, his doubt a betrayal that felt like losing him entirely. I wanted to scream that it was all lies, to crush Lila and Charles for exploiting his trust, but the fear of breaking his heart kept me silent, my hands trembling with rage and despair. The second shock came as Vanessa Cole, the PR consultant, strutted in, her heels clicking like gunshots. "Carter, you washed-up fraud," she sneered, her Boston drawl sharp as broken glass. "We've got Ethan on tape, telling Lauren he's done protecting your dirty $4 billion empire. Cough up $2 billion, or we'll make sure he's the star witness against you. $2 billion. The lie was monstrous, but her claim about Ethan was the killing blow, a vicious twist that made my knees buckle. Ethan's eyes filled with tears, his voice shaking as he turned to Lauren. "You recorded me? You used me?" The betrayal was a raw wound, his pain mirroring mine as I pictured him confiding in her, unaware she was forging his words into a noose. The grief was a tidal wave, drowning me in regret for every secret I'd kept to protect him. My mind screamed to confront Vanessa, to expose her lies, but the fear of shattering Ethan's faith and love kept me rooted, a father's heart clashing with a warrior's fury. The third shock was a brutal detonation as Tony Russo, the crooked FBI agent, barged in, flashing his badge with a smirk. "Yo, Carter, you filthy old hustler," he growled, his voice pure Southie grit. "We've got proof you hid $5 billion in a Swiss account, and Ethan's ready to testify you've been lying to him since he was a kid. Pay $3 billion, or we'll lock you up and let your boy watch." $3 billion. The lie was cataclysmic, but his claim about Ethan was a wound that bled raw, the image of my son being used as a weapon against me a nightmare I couldn't escape. Ethan stood, his fists clenched, his voice breaking. "Lauren, how could you do this?" Lauren's smirk faltered, her eyes darting to Tony, but she doubled down, hissing, "Ethan, your dad's a liar. He's been playing you for years." The room spun, the betrayal, a physical ache as I saw Ethan's world crumble, his trust in his wife shattered by her greed. I wanted to grab Tony by his badge and scream that he'd never touch my son. But the fear that Ethan might believe these lies froze me, my heart pounding with rage and sorrow. My internal struggle was a maelstrom, tearing me apart from within. I'd built my empire to give Ethan freedom, but every secret I'd kept now felt like a chain dragging him into Lauren's trap. The guilt was crushing. Had my silence made him doubt my love, leaving him open to Tony's poison? The fury was a wildfire, urging me to crush Lauren, Charles, Lila, Vanessa, and Tony for exploiting my son's heart. But the deepest pain was the terror that Ethan's trust in me was crumbling, that he might see me as the criminal they painted. I saw him as a boy, his laughter echoing in our old Cambridge home, and the thought of losing that bond was a sorrow that gutted me. Rachel's voice broke through, fierce and steady. "Mr. Carter, I've got Tony's bank records. He's been wired millions by Lauren's crew." Her loyalty was a beacon, but Jim's text followed. "William, they're filing for an emergency asset freeze tonight. They're betting you'll cave to save Ethan." The stakes were apocalyptic $2 billion, my son's heart, my legacy. I locked eyes with Ethan, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "Son, I've been hiding things to protect you, but it's time you know the truth. Lauren's crew thought they'd broken me, but they'd awakened a father who'd burn the world to save his son. The restaurant was a war zone, and I was ready to fight. The Capitol Grille's polished ambiance was a cruel facade, the clink of glasses and murmur of diners, a mocking backdrop to the battlefield where my $2 billion empire hung in the balance. Lauren's relentless onslaught, fake DOJ reports, forged videos, and planted traitors had turned my life into a war zone, with Ethan's heart as the ultimate casualty. Rachel's proof that Ethan was loyal, his pain twisted into lies by Lauren's crew, was a faint beacon, but his shattered expression across the table, his voice breaking as he confronted Lauren, was a wound that bled raw. My heart was a furnace of grief and rage, burning for the son I'd raised to value honesty, now ensnared by a woman who saw him as a key to my fortune. I'd hidden my wealth to shield him from greed's venom, But that secrecy now felt like a betrayal of my own making, leaving him vulnerable to a predator who'd turned his love into a weapon. The guilt was a relentless storm. Had my silence made him doubt my integrity, opening the door to Lauren's poison? I wanted to pull him into my arms, to promise I'd fix this. But the fear of losing his trust forever kept me rooted, a father torn between love and vengeance. The first shock hit like a nuclear blast as Lauren leaned forward, her smirk venomous, her Southie accent dripping with street grit. "Yo, Carter, you pathetic old fraud," she sneered loud enough for the restaurant to hush. "Think you can play the broke-ass dad with your $6 billion in dirty cash? We've got Ethan's diary pages where he calls you a liar, saying he's done with your shady empire. Pay $4 billion, or we'll splash it on X for the world to see." $4 billion. The lie was apocalyptic, a public execution meant to bury me. But her claim about Ethan's diary was the killing blow, a vicious twist that made my knees buckle. Ethan's eyes widened, his voice a raw whisper. "You stole my journal? Lauren, how could you?" The betrayal was a gut punch, his private thoughts, raw, vulnerable words meant for no one twisted into a weapon against me. I pictured him writing late at night, wrestling with his fears, unaware Lauren was mining his soul for profit. The grief was a tidal wave, drowning me in regret for every secret I'd kept to protect him. My mind screamed to confront her, to expose her cruelty, but the fear of shattering Ethan's heart kept me silent, a father's love clashing with a warrior's fury. The drama surged as Charles Mitchell stood, his face a mask of greed, his voice booming. "Carter, you slimy bastard. We've got a leaked bank statement, $5 billion in hidden accounts, and Ethan's signature on a letter saying he's ready to turn you in for tax fraud. Cough up $3 billion, or we'll make sure he's the one who buries you." $3 billion. The lie was monstrous, but the claim that Ethan had signed a letter was a dagger, a betrayal that felt like losing him entirely. Ethan's hands shook, his voice breaking as he turned to Charles. "I never signed anything. You're lying." The pain in his eyes mirrored mine, a shared wound as we realized the Mitchells had forged his name to frame me. The guilt was crushing. Had my silence made Ethan vulnerable to this treachery? My chest ached, the image of his trust in me crumbling a nightmare I couldn't escape. Rachel slipped me a note, her handwriting frantic. "I've got the forged letter. It's from Vince's laptop. Ethan's clean." Her loyalty was a lifeline, but the rage burned hotter, urging me to crush Charles and Lauren for daring to use my son against me. The second shock came as Vanessa Cole and Tony Russo stormed in, their faces smug with triumph. Vanessa's voice was pure Southie venom. "Carter, you washed-up crook. We've got a surveillance tape, Ethan, telling Lauren he's done with your $7 billion lies. Pay $5 billion, or we'll make sure he's the star witness in your trial." $5 billion. The lie was cataclysmic, but the claim about Ethan was a wound that bled raw, the image of my son being framed as a traitor, a nightmare that gutted me. Ethan stood, his voice a raw scream. "You recorded me? You used my pain?" Lauren's smirk faltered, but Tony doubled down, sneering. "Kid, your dad's a fraud. Pay up, Carter, or Ethan's career is toast." The betrayal was a physical ache. Ethan's anguish, a mirror to my own as I saw his world collapse. I wanted to slam my fist into Tony's face, to scream that they'd never touch my son, but the fear that Ethan might doubt me froze me, my heart pounding with rage and sorrow. The third shock was a brutal detonation as Lila Bennett stepped forward, holding a tablet with a fake contract, her voice dripping with malice. "Carter, you dirty old hustler, we've got proof you rigged a $6 billion stock deal, and Ethan's emails to Lauren saying he's ashamed of your crimes. Pay $4 billion, or we'll ruin him too." $4 billion. The lie was apocalyptic, but her claim about Ethan's emails was the final dagger, a betrayal that felt like losing him forever. Ethan's eyes filled with tears, his voice breaking. "I never wrote that. Dad, you have to believe me." The pain in his voice was a knife in my heart, his desperation a mirror to my own. I stood, my resolve forged in steel, and faced them all. "Enough," I said, my voice low but lethal. "You want to play dirty? Here's my offer. $10 million to each of you. One-time payment. Sign a contract to leave Ethan and me alone forever, or I unleash every legal weapon I have, your forged documents, your bribes, your lies. You'll lose everything." The room froze, Ethan's eyes wide with shock, Lauren's crew stunned into silence. I'd built my empire from nothing, and I'd burn it all to protect my son. My internal struggle was a maelstrom, tearing me apart. I'd hidden my wealth to give Ethan freedom, but every secret had become a chain dragging him into Lauren's trap. The guilt was crushing. Had my silence made him doubt my love, leaving him open to their poison? The fury was a wildfire, urging me to destroy them for exploiting his heart. But the deepest pain was the fear that I'd lose him forever, that he'd see me as the villain they painted. I saw him as a boy, his laughter echoing in our old home, and the thought of losing that bond was a sorrow that gutted me. Ethan grabbed my hand, his voice steady. "Dad, I trust you. Let's end this." His loyalty was a beacon, shattering the doubt that had haunted me. The lesson of this ordeal was clear. Honesty, not secrecy, is the true shield of love, a knowledge I'd learned too late but would carry forever. The education of facing betrayal taught me that trust is fragile, a truth that demands courage to rebuild. This lesson in protecting what matters through transparency, this knowledge of standing firm against greed, this education in valuing family above wealth, these are the values that define us. Unlike the original tale, where a payoff ended the fight, I chose a different path. No money, only justice. Lauren's crew, faced with exposure, backed down, their lies crumbling under legal scrutiny. Ethan and I rebuilt our bond, stronger for the truth, a lesson in resilience, a knowledge that love endures, an education in facing pain head-on. If this story of betrayal and redemption hit you, drop a comment below. How does it connect to your life? Hit that subscribe button on our YouTube channel, RevengeX, for more gripping tales every day. Like, share, and let us know what this knowledge stirred in your heart. Wishing you all health, a joyful life, and peace every day. Goodbye, and see you in the next video.